Becky Duff here. Welcome back to my channel. I am here to do my May wrap-up. So I don't do a whole lot of wrap-ups typically, but this month I am doing a wrap-up because I was participating in 2 readathons during May, which was the May the Forest Read With You and Escape the Readathon. And I failed at both. I was on the partier team and we did not escape the readathon. Sadly, we came in 3rd place, I believe. Yes, very sad. But it was a fairly successful reading month for me though, so I am going to quickly wrap up what I read. So I read The Escape Room, which I have a little stack of books here. I read The Escape Room by Megan Golden. This, I think, was just a mood read for Escape the Readathon, and this worked for the thriller prompt for the May the Forest Read With You. And I talked about this a lot in my reading vlog for May for the readathons, so I won't talk about that in great depth here, but I will be passing this book on along to my mom. I think she'll enjoy it. It had thrilling moments in it when there is this group of 4 co-workers together in what they believe is an escape room taking place in an elevator. And it goes between their perspective and then Sarah Hall's perspective, and she is a fellow co-worker that used to work with them and had been fired. This is very much a revenge plot, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't a 5-star, maybe a 3.5, and I would check out for Megan Golden again. I think this is her debut novel. The Escape Room is her debut novel, so I would definitely read more from her as she grows as a writer. I got distracted, so I don't know what I was talking about, but this book also contains a lot of conversations about women in the workforce, women working in high-powered jobs that are male-dominated, and the kind of corruption of money. And, okay, Luigi. In this book, they work, I don't even know what they do. They realize there's a price to be paid for the terrible deeds they've committed in their ruthless climb up the corporate ladder. So yeah, it talks about like corruption and money and how they have forgotten to look at the people behind the deals that they are making and just looking at the money part of it. And it was good conversation. It would be good for a book club because there would be a lot of those discussions to be had in there. So again, I talk about this more in depth in the vlog I did for these 2 readathons. I also read 2 graphic novels, which were from the library. I do not have them on me. And again, I show you some of the artwork and stuff in the graphic novels while I talk about them in that vlog. So I will not talk about them here, but there's Pillow of the Woods by May K. Nugent and Nugent. This one is dealing with loss and grief and loneliness. Some very heavy feelings in there, and it is a middle grade. Yes, it is a middle grade. So really beautiful drawing, it's in the woods. It's very nature and in the woods, foliage, water, stuff like that. Very beautiful, and it did a really good job of showing how emotions can kind of like overwhelm you and become so big and powerful, and you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. And in those moments, you are just your emotions. And I thought it was really well done. And it also being a graphic novel, there's actually that visual representation, not just the description of it through words, but through art as well. And I think that's great for adults, but especially being a middle grade book. My daughter is talking, she's in grade 6, and she's talking about what they are learning in health class. And I'm like, are they teaching mental health stuff? Because they did not teach that to us growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. They didn't teach mental health stuff at all. And so I hope that mental health is definitely a part of health class nowadays, and books like this are a great tool and resource as well. And then I read Arsenic in the Azaleas by Dale Mayers, and that was for Kayla's vlog. Kayla read this book because it takes place where she lives, and it's supposed to be like a cozy murder mystery. And she was doing a full spoiler vlog for it where she tries to solve the mystery by the end of the book. This book doesn't really lend itself to you figuring out or putting together the clues and solving the mystery before the main character does. And I think Kayla said she gave it like a high, like maybe a 2.5, or I can't remember if it was lower 2s or whatever. It wasn't like the highest rating ever. But she is planning on reading the second one as well during the summer because, again, it takes place where she lives. And I want to participate as well. It was a quick read. It was under a 7-hour audiobook. And I just enjoy the animals. Honestly, there is an African gray parrot named Thaddeus. There is an Maine Coon cat that she calls Goliath, and then her basset hound, my favorite, my personal bias when it comes to the animals, named Muggs. So I talk about all that in my vlog and show pictures of what a Maine Coon cat looks like, how big they really are, and my basset hound that I had. Yeah, it's not like the best book ever, but I'm just here for the animals, honestly. I also finished reading Book Love by Debbie Tung. She does like webcomic kind of stuff, I guess, and this is just a collection of her bookish comics that she has put together in a book, and I really enjoyed it, and I just had it out from the library, but it was really sweet and fun and totally like very bookish, very me. It spoke to me, definitely, and I may buy that if I see it at a used bookstore or something at some point. And she also did Quiet Girl in a Noisy Place or something like that, which I would definitely be interested in checking out as well. I've really enjoyed her artwork and her comics. So another book I read for the readathon, the prompts for Escape the Readathon were interesting. Lexi with Books with Lexi did this readathon, and it was amazing, and the work and time and effort she must have put into this thing was unbelievable. And she had to come up with 48 separate unique prompts because every team had different prompts, and for every door that you had to get through to escape the readathon, to escape this haunted house, there was 2 prompts. So one would be like, read a book that the cover is your favorite color, or read a book from a new author. And then you had to pick a book, and the book could fit both prompts, but you had to decide what prompt you were going to log it under when you were finished the book. And then only one prompt opened the door. So say there's 10 people on the team and 9 of us read the prompt that says the favorite color on the book, and one of us reads from a new author, but the new author one is going to open the door, then we haven't opened the door yet, right? And we have to figure out and discuss among ourselves, like, okay, are we going to focus on this prompt? Are we going to focus on that prompt? What's going to happen? So some of the prompts were like, this book is blue, right? So one of the prompts was read a book where the main color comes before the color of your last read in the rainbow. So what is it? Red, orange, yellow, blue, green, purple. So blue. So if I read this book, which was blue, then I'd have to read the yellow cover one next. So some of them were pretty unique, and you didn't know the prompts. Like, you don't get your 6 or 7 or 8 prompts for the month all at once. You get them as you go through the doors. So I was just reading books that fit with the prompts for May the Force read with you. So some of the books I was reading, I'm like, these don't fit either one of the prompts. But sometimes, like, if you made it through a door before you got your next set of prompts, it would just be mood reading. So that worked. Anyways, props to Lexi, because that readathon was intense and really fun. And I can just only imagine the work that goes on behind the scenes in a readathon like that. So props to her for that. I read So We Beat On by Elena Garcia, and I believe this one worked as like a new to me author or something for Escape the Readathon. And in May the Force Read With You, it was take your favorite color, and on a color wheel, read the color that is opposite of that color. So this one is all green, and I picked my favorite color as like a hot pink color. This book has been on my bookshelf for over a year now, and it is like a self-published on Amazon kind of book, and Canadian author. This book wasn't bad. The formatting is a little... It's not a very long book. It's 188 pages. But they should have formatted it a little bit better and not been so much dense writing all the way to like the very edges of the book. The margins, like this margin is like, it's kind of hard to see the way I have the book, but like not even as wide as my finger, the margins. So they should have had the margins a little bit wider and just had a thicker book, like more, not quite this thick, but more of like the mass market paperbacks kind of thing. This, I imagine, is probably cheaper being less pages. So I can understand why you would want to do that. And this could have used at least one more round of editing. There was a lot of like typos and just a few little grammar things and stuff. I could overlook it, but it is distracting. And it wasn't a lot, but it just could have used that one more look through by an editor. The story starts off with this mother. She's dying, and she's writing to her kids, starting this letter and saying like, death, I do not fear it. I have died before. I take solace in the inevitable fact that my final countdown of this lifetime is approaching its end. And then she's like, this is my 3rd life. I don't have long, but I want to share my story. And then it goes like Lifetime 1, December 25th, 1984, birth. It starts like with talking about like her parents getting ready to have this baby and going to the hospital and the experience of her being born. The one thing it does is it jumps quite far through time. Like there's quite large jumps in the timeline. It goes birth, and then it goes age 5 is chapter 2, and then chapter 3 is age 18, and then it goes to age 21, age 29, and then it goes to lifetime number 2. And then it repeats the same thing again. Birth, age 5, because she's living the same life over and over again. It's not that she has multiple lives and she's gone through different experiences. She's going through the same experiences, but kind of trying to rewrite her past because like something tragic happens in her first lifetime and she's like, I don't want that to happen again. And she does manage to change it, but it's not like exactly the way she wanted to change it. There was still a tragic thing that happened, but it was slightly different than the first time. But reading through that like 3 times, like her being born 3 times and her turning 5 3 different times, the author Elena did a really good job of not making it too repetitive, and it was different enough, and you understood like what the main character, Noelle, was trying to do in each of her lifetimes without it just being really repetitive. So that was really good. And it was interesting because when she's writing the second lifetime, she is talking like the baby, the fetus, Noelle. She hasn't been born yet, but she's still like a fetus in her mother's womb and has this consciousness. And then it's describing her being born, like from the baby's perspective. And it was really interesting, but she has all the memories of her past life. So she's like this tiny little baby and she's hearing like the doctors talking or her parents talking or whatever. And she's like looking around, or she wants to look around, but she's just a baby. So she doesn't have control of her neck muscles and stuff yet. And she's like, I hear my dad's voice. I want to see him. And she can't see him just yet. Right. So it was really kind of interesting to see her at like age 5 or age 18 or whatever, but she has like 30 years prior experience. So she's really smart. She was probably like average intelligence the first time around, but then the second time it's like she's that little bit smarter because she's got 30 years of experience behind her, right? And the second lifetime, her explaining being born made me want another baby. But just that, I mean, giving birth isn't exactly the funnest thing, the most fun thing to be doing, but just that experience of giving birth, having that new life in your arms and holding that precious little baby, the way she described it as the baby, like it just made me want to have another baby. Just the baby. Just the part where you're in the hospital, you're holding this little precious baby for like maybe a week, and then I would be over it. I just love newborns, and they're so sweet and tiny, and they don't do anything yet. And we've been blessed with very good babies. Like we haven't had to deal with colic or anything like that. They are average babies that cry, and they're up during the night, and they're up every like 2 hours to nurse. And our baby is 16 months old, and he's not fully sleeping through the night yet, but that's my fault. We haven't had babies with colic and stuff that are really, really difficult to handle. So I personally enjoy the newborn stage, and I miss that stage, and it's such a short amount of time. So this book, so her descriptions of this and stuff were really good because I was like, I want a baby. Like just reading this book. Oh my gosh. So I think if she wants to keep writing, Elena wants to write like another book, it would be good if she could get another editor. I don't know if maybe she just edited this herself or whatever, but if she could get more editing done on her books and better formatting, and just as she grows and learns and matures as an author, I think the next story would be really good. I'll just read the back here and I'll put like a link to this book on Amazon. So Noelle Anderson's brief life had been plagued by a series of ill-fated misfortunes. Her parents died in a tragic car accident when she was 5 years old. She was coerced by her abusive boyfriend into the ominous adult modeling scene and had to survive alone in the streets of New York. Her defiant spirit refuses to give up, and Noelle finally finds peace with the elderly mentor, but the dire past catches up and her transient life is cut short. However, instead of being shepherded to the proverbial heaven, Noelle finds herself reborn into her own life and receives a seemingly unique chance to prevent any of the tragedies that surrounded her family and herself in the prior lifetime. But can she ever escape the haunting memories of the prior tribulations? So that's what this book is about. So we beat on a novel by Alicia Garza. I would probably give this one also a 3.5 star rating. Good, and I think she has potential. And then I read Michael Connelly, The Night Fire, a Renee Ballard and Harry Bosch novel. And I read this for dual perspectives, or multiple POV, for the May the Force Read With You For Escape the Readathon, there was 2 prompts. Like I said, one of them was read a book in a different format than you usually do, or from your last read, or with the in the title. I picked a different one for the, and then this one I put as the different format because I actually ended up listening to this entire thing as an audiobook. And that's what I'm going to look up here. If you don't know, Michael Connelly has been writing books forever, and he is the one that got me into reading again with the book The Last Coyote. So I've been following Bosch since like the 90s. I didn't start reading them in the 90s. It was more like 2003-ish. But I've been following his story since the 90s. And there is now a TV show on Amazon Prime called Bosch, just Bosch. That's the main character, Harry Bosch. And he is a homicide detective. So if you are interested in those stories, definitely check out Michael Connelly and the Harry Bosch series, or check out, if you like them as a TV show, you can check it out there. They follow stories from the books. And there's also a sequel to it called Bosch Legacy, which follows his daughter a little bit more. So Bosch, the homicide detective, is played by Titus Welliver, plays Bosch. He voices his character in here. So as soon as I picked up the audiobook for this and heard them talking, I don't know why I'm doing like the phone thing, and it's like narrated by Titus Welliver, I was like, that's Bosch! So that was so cool to be able to hear his voice in this. So I really, really enjoyed this audiobook experience. And then Renee Ballard is also narrated by a female narrator. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. This is Harry Bosch number 22, by the way, if you look at Storygraph. Titus Welliver and Christine Lakin narrates Renee Ballard. And what I really liked about this, when you're listening to the audiobook and Bosch is speaking, like you're getting Bosch's point of view, he does all the voices. But then if he's having a conversation with Renee, the narrator comes in, like the female narrator, Christine Lakin, and she talks Renee's parts. And so there's no like, Renee said blah, blah, blah. Bosch responded blah, blah, blah. It's just a back and forth conversation like you would hear like on TV. There's none of the he said, she said stuff. So I didn't even notice that until like their second conversation. I was like, wait, it never says like Renee said this, Renee said that. So I thought that was really fun. And then in Renee's parts, she does all the talking. And then if she's talking to Bosch, again, his voice comes in and narrates it. So that was really fun. And I thought this was a really great audiobook. If you like Michael Connelly, if you like the Harry Bosch series, if you like Renee Ballard, I would definitely check it out. I never hear anybody talking about him, so if you read Michael Connelly, comment down below if you enjoy his books or detective stories. Some crimes light a fire that never goes out. A judge murdered in a city park. Mikey Haller, the Lincoln lawyer, defends the man accused. Yes, he also did the Lincoln Lawyer. That was the movie with Michael McConaughey. That's this guy. That's his book. This is not Michael McConaughey. This is Michael Connelly. A homeless person burned alive. Detective Renee Ballard catches the case on the LAPD's notorious graveyard shift, an unsolved homicide from a lifetime ago. Harry Bosch has left a missing case filed by his mentor who passed away. Why did he keep the case all these years? To find the truth or to bury it? In LA, crime never sleeps. But in Ballard, Bosch, and Haller, the fire always burns. Will it light the way or leave their lives in ashes? Another thing I want to talk about is Michael Connelly is an old white guy, and most people are tired of hearing from old white guys. I like to think that Michael Connelly is one of those old white guys who's actually heard what people are saying and cares enough to make changes in his books. Now, I believe that for the longest time, Harry Bosch had a partner. His name was Jerry Edgar, and he was a black guy, but our main character is white, which only makes sense because Michael Connelly is white, so that's the kind of experience he is writing from. Michael Connelly, I believe, is a crime beat writer, like journalist, before becoming this author. So he's not writing from the perspective of a detective, but as a white male. But I was listening to the audiobook, and there is a scene in here. There is a couple of black gang members that are talking, and they're talking on the phone, and they say the N-word. But when I was listening to it, it sounded like they said nig, and that was it. Just N-I-G. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, you obviously know what they're saying to each other. And I think Michael Connelly doesn't use that kind of language a lot in his books. Like, it's not a shock value thing. It felt like authentic to the conversation that these two people would be having. And I thought I marked it down in here where it happens, because I was like, I gotta go and look and read, like, what are the words that, what are the letters used in the story. I can't speak if this is sensitive or not. As a white woman, I don't know. I personally think that Michael Connelly has at least taken steps to be sensitive with the way he writes different characters and how they would authentically sound without using words that are offensive. In the audio, could they have just said N instead of nig? Maybe it just sounded that way because I was listening to it at 1.5 speed. I don't know. But I think they wanted to make it, like, obviously they want to make it clear in the audiobook what is being said, but they probably could have used the word or just the letter N. That's up for debate. But in the book, it says, like, he accepted the call. Yo-E, I can't remember what his name, Elvin. His name is Elvin, but he just calls him E for whatever short. That U-N, and then it just has Yo-E, that U-N, and then just the line and question mark. Blah, blah, blah. No, my N. I ain't wanting nothing. Nothing. Yeah, and it's used a couple of times, but not excessively, and it's mostly just like in this conversation between these two guys. I just thought that was really cool that Michael Connelly has taken steps to be sensitive to those who might be reading his books, and the perspectives in his books that are coming from a place that are not his lived experience. And I hope he's one of the good old white guys, because you know what, not all old white men are bad, horrible, terrible people. I have a few of them in my life, and no one is saying that, but there are some authors out there obviously who could use some sensitivity training maybe. And I'm hoping that it sounds like Michael Connelly is one of those who is hearing what the people are saying and just being more sensitive in his books. I never noticed him saying the N-word a lot in them before, but it might not have just been something I picked up on. I don't think he uses it like a lot anyways, but yeah, I just thought that was really awesome. And I just really enjoyed this, and especially if you like the show Bosch. It is fun to hear Bosch narrating it. Okay, I've already been talking for 35 minutes. My husband is home. My throat is getting sore. So let's just move along. I read Go With The Flow, which is a graphic novel, again, for tweens. I'd say from like just before you hit puberty and up would be a good age range for this. My daughter is 9 and she hasn't quite hit puberty yet, but it's good to read it before. So this is a book about periods. And I talk about that a lot in the reading vlog that I did. So check that out for sure. Of course, that'll be linked down below and everything. And then I read The Poppy War for the buzzword, which was flavors, in May, and people were like, poppy's not really a flavor. I googled it. I was like, is poppy a flavor? They're like, when you grind up the seeds, it has a nutty flavor. And I was like, good enough for me. I'm counting it, and I eat like lemon poppy seed muffins and stuff like that. And my husband is like, yeah, but it's not the poppy seed that you're tasting, it's the lemon. And I was like, I don't care, I'm counting it, because this was the only thing on my shelves that had a flavor in it, and I could have gone to the library or whatever and borrowed a book, because there is Honey and Spice I thought about reading, or The Honeys, or something Jodi Picoult did about honey or whatever. I could have done honey, but no, I had poppy on my bookshelf, and I wanted to read this by R.F. Kuang. If anybody out there doesn't know what this is and is like me and is reading this for the very first time, I'm trying to think of how this fit into my readathons. I think this one ended up being a mood read for the Escape readathon. May the Force. What did I read this for? Maybe it was orange on the cover? I can't remember. Anyways, not important. Did I like this book? I'm not a huge fantasy reader, and I've mentioned that a couple of times this year, especially very political fantasy. This had a lot of political stuff in it. I enjoyed the characters in this. I really enjoyed her friendship with... I wrote a little note here at the beginning. I am not one for war, strategy, or history. I don't read a ton of fantasy, but I am really enjoying the characters in this story. And our main character, Rin, is friends with Katai, and I really liked their relationship. I am sitting on the floor and my leg is going asleep. It's like all numb. I enjoyed just the characters in this and their friendship and the banter and stuff like that, and her with her mentor. I ended up getting the audiobook for this on Scribd and listening to this because I just couldn't keep up with reading it, and I knew it would just slow me down so much to read. Like, I would have only gotten this done in May, basically, and like one other book. So I ended up listening to this as an audiobook. What I like about listening to audiobooks for books like this is when the books are in a different culture, Japanese, Chinese, anything that would have like an accent, and especially ones that have words like, if it's a British book, yeah, I could get an audiobook with a British accent and that would be cool, but a lot of the words I would know how to pronounce on my own. But if it's a book that is like Chinese history and stuff like that, they're going to use some words that I don't necessarily know how to pronounce. Even some of the names in here, I was unsure of the correct pronunciation. So hearing it as an audiobook is cool that way, plus the accents and stuff like that really add to the story. I also listened to an audiobook with my daughters about The Dragon Warrior by Katie Zhao. And that one, again, there was a lot of words in it I would have never known how to pronounce. So that one was really cool to be able to listen to that one with my daughters as well. That's a middle grade one if you're interested in that. I am not going to keep up with the Poppy War trilogy. I know this is for a lot of people. I know people absolutely love this story. It's just not for me. I cannot keep up with the political stuff of it. I thought it was well written. I can see why people absolutely love it. I can see why it would be a beloved trilogy. And I will be picking up Yellowface at some point, probably again as an audiobook. I probably won't buy it. This one I got free, I think, at my thrift store. My local thrift store has every Saturday books and board games are free. So I think I saw this there and just picked it up because I heard so many good things about it. I would recommend this to people who like fantasy and the political and the war part of it. I've talked for 41 minutes. I'm not going to tell you what this is about necessarily. I think most people know what it's about, or you can Google it. It was well written, and I really enjoyed the characters. I would recommend it to fantasy people who like these kind of stories. And I'm going to stop picking up most fantasy. I'm not going to say I'm never going to read it again, because that's not necessarily true. I am open to reading different genres. Just, I'm going to be staying away from the heavily political and war-heavy fantasies, for sure. So, he doesn't want me to pick him up, though. I chose to finish listening to, and pushed myself to finish listening to, you might be a little bit off. My tripod just completely fell on me. The May the Force Read With You Readathon. You had to read everything beginning May 1st and finishing by May 31st. The Escape the Readathon, if more than 50% of your book was read, or 200 pages, depending on how big your book was read in the month of May, it counted. So I made sure I finished listening to this book, which is over 44 hours long. It's like 44 and a half hours long. And I forced myself to finish. That sounds bad. I really, really, really like these stories, but I made myself finish it in the month of May. This is the 5th in the Outlander series. 4th? 5th? I don't even know. For anyone in the world who hasn't read Outlander yet, or at least watched the show and has no idea what this is, Claire is in Scotland on a second honeymoon with her husband Frank, and she ends up going through this stone circle. She goes through the stones, and this starts in 1940 something, just after the Second World War, and she ends up in the 1700s, 200 years prior, and ends up with this band of Scottish Highlanders and needs to marry one of them to protect herself there, named Jamie Fraser, and it is their epic love story. This one is number 4, according to Storygraph, and I can't tell you what happens in the first book versus the 4th versus the 5th or the 6th. And I have not read the 9th one yet, but I bought it for like 50 cents at my library because it's a hardcover and it's a $40 book, $45 book. So I'm so excited I got it for like 50 cents. But I listened to this. It is 44 hours and 50 minutes long. Again, I'm not going to give you the plot of this one. You're either interested in Outlander or you're not, and you know what the plot of it is. Comment down below if you have read it. I don't hear anybody talking on BookTube about this series at all. They talk about reading the first one, and then that's it. We're talking about like fantasy books and these epic long stories. This is my epic long story. People are like asking on book tag questions and stuff, like, how many books is too many books in a series? And people are like, trilogies are good. Anything over 3 or 4 books, maybe 4. This one is on 9 and I love it, and she's still writing them. So I know the audience is out there. I just don't hear anybody talking about them. But this is my long, huge series that I have gotten into, and I originally read them in around 2017. And now I'm rereading them. I also finished reading, which I started January 1st, I finished reading How to Pray, A Simple Guide for Normal People by Pete Greig. If you are a Christian or not and are interested in prayer and how to break it down and make it really simple, and different kinds of prayer like contemplative prayer, intercessory prayer, just the different ways of communing with God and asking for your own needs and wants and things, and also on behalf of other people. This is a great resource. And he even has, like, at the end of each chapter, he has things like more on confession and reconciliation, prayer course session, prayer tools, and further reading, and gives you different resources there. Pete Greig is co-founder and champions the 24/7 prayer movement around the world. He is a pastor at Emmaus Road in Guildford, England. He just breaks it down like the acronym PRAY: pause, rejoice, ask, and yield. So a great resource to read for sure. And then for May the Force Read With You, there was read a book that is less than 275 pages, I think, and this one clocks in, my copy clocks in at 156 pages of The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, a revealing novel about teenagers by teenagers. So I remember loving this book when I read this in like grade 7 or 8. Just absolutely love this book, and more like 8 or 9. And I got this copy a couple years ago, and I've been wanting to reread it for a long time, and I was planning on rereading this in March but never got to it, and then saw that it fit the prompt for this readathon. This one I think ended up being a mood read. Again, most of my reads for Escape the Readathon were mood reads. S.E. Hinton wrote this book when she wrote her first book in 1967 when she was 17 years old. And young adult literature will never be the same. The Outsiders is a story of gangs and violence that has been read and reread by countless young men and women. Miss Hinton says she wrote the book because she couldn't find any stories that portrayed the lives of teenagers outside of the narrow world of the high school prom. So she created another world, one with no parents or adult authority figures. People complain so much about YA, and we're all like, where's the adult? Where are the parents? Well, you can blame S.E. Hinton for that one, because she started YA, basically. It's still going 40 years later, 50 years later. A place where kids lived by their own rules. The result was one of the great bestsellers in the field of adolescent literature. Again, if you don't know what this is about, I don't know where you have been. We read this one in school. That's what introduced me to it. As I was reading it now, I was like, why did I love this book so much when I first read it? This has nothing to do with like anything that would interest me whatsoever. This book is one of the books I loved, and Where the Red Fern Grows was a book that I just like devoured. I just loved it. That was like grade 7. And I wasn't a big reader then, and this didn't make me like want to go and read more books, but I just loved this book. And same with Where the Red Fern Grows. It was about a boy and his dogs hunting. Like, I don't hunt. I'm not a boy. I don't live in the 60s. Like, I've never lived in the 60s. Not that this wasn't a good book. Now, I was just reading it now and I was like, why did I love this book so much? I don't even know. But a classic. I don't know what else to say about this book. It has these cool sprayed edges, though. And I don't know when this copy was from. Copyright 1967. And then it says, like, previous Dell edition, 5 printings. First Laurel Leaf printing, 1969. And then the 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th, 26th, and the 27th was last done in 1979. So it hasn't been reprinted in a long time. That's The Outsiders. And then I also listened to The Last Word by Taylor Adams, and that was for the Book Troop book club. It was good. It was fast-paced. It takes place all in one night, isolated setting, like no exit. I have not read Hairpin Bridge yet. I own it. Everyone talks about how terrible it is, and it makes me nervous to read it. I bought it because, again, it was like 50 cents at my library. Everyone loves No Exit, and people seem to be enjoying The Last Word, or enjoying it a lot more than Hairpin Bridge, so I am interested to see the differences between these two that I have read by Taylor Adams and Hairpin Bridge. I've been talking almost an hour. I don't know what words are anymore. The Last Word is basically this woman reads this book. It's terrible. She gives it a 1-star review, says something bad about it on Amazon or whatever as she's reviewing the book, and then the author writes back and is like, you don't understand writing, blah, blah, blah. This is really bad for a self-published author. Please take down your review. She's like, I'm sorry that this negatively impacts you, I guess, as a writer, but no, like, this is my review. And he's like, this is the last time I'm going to tell you this. Please take down your bad review. You don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, no. And then he like stalks her and tries to kill her, basically. And there is the whole movie troupe, I was gonna say, book troupe live show discussion about it, if you want spoilers and stuff about what we thought about it. I think the consensus is mostly that people enjoyed it. It is a little over the top and crazy, and the biggest gripe about it was that it just doesn't end. There's so many times, like, especially, okay, the last, like, hour and a half of this book that I was listening to it, my phone, like, froze, but it was still playing, so I was too scared to restart my phone in case it all screwed up and then I wouldn't be able to finish it in time to watch the live show, because I had like 2 hours before the live show and an hour and a half left on the book, and I was listening to it at 1.5 times speed. So I was like, I'll be able to finish this before the live show starts. And then, yeah, like my phone was screwing up, so I had no idea how many minutes I had left on the audiobook, and I'm like, okay, it's done now. Now it's done. And okay, now it's, and there was like 4 times I was like, and now it's done, and it just kept going. There was a couple little twists in there that happened at the end when you think it should be the end. So like those were okay twists and stuff, and you're kind of like, oh snap. The one twist is kind of awesome that happens with a phone call. If you know, you know. At the very end there's like a wellness check phone call that happens. There's a book inside the book kind of thing, and there is one character in here who writes or who has written a true crime novel before. So there's kind of like a true crime novel happening in it. And it was really interesting that way. And I listened to it as an audiobook, as I said. And so there's a little bit of a different narration. Like there's a female narrator, but then there's a male that talks about like the book inside the book and stuff. The narrative flow of the book was really interesting with the excerpts of this true crime novel being written. I don't want to give away like any spoilers for it, so it's kind of hard to talk about. But I would say a 4 for how fast paced it was. Definitely not a 5 because it just doesn't end at the end. There's no end. But it's a good, fast-paced thriller that you can just, like, kind of sit down and binge. A lot of people, I think, read it in, like, one night, or if you're more like me and don't finish books in one sitting, it's a 9-hour, 57 minutes. So it's a 10-hour audiobook. So it's not exactly short, but I know most people out there are listening at a lot faster. Even my 1.5 times speed is slow for most people on BookTube. So even if you're listening to it at 2 times speed, that's only 5 hours. So it's a fun, like, over the weekend kind of fast-paced thriller. I wouldn't necessarily say it's summery vibes. I think it's a little bit colder. She's on the beach. She's house sitting a beach house. Like, it's a beach house, but it's not like warm summer vibes. So you could probably read it in the fall as well. Any time of year, honestly. You don't have to read beach reads in the summer, obviously, but I just mean it doesn't really give beach summery vibes if that's what you're looking for in your thriller this time of year. And then the last book that I finished June 1st, but I'm going to add it to the wrap up here, is Her Mother's Daughter by Daniela Petrova. And this book was picked by my husband for the May the Force Read With You, nature on the cover, and then for Escape the Readathon, it didn't end up fitting any of the prompts, so very frustrating. But this cover is just absolutely gorgeous. It's got a dragonfly here, which doesn't really pertain to the book at all. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just nature. So I just love these flowers. I put the dust jacket back on upside down. I had it off to read it, and I threw it back on to show you how beautiful it was. I've read a lot of books like this. I would put it in the same vein as The Push by Ashley Audrain. So if you did not like The Push, you'd probably not like Her Mother's or Her Daughter's Mother. I'm trying to think of other books. It's a stalking book. Women stalking women kind of thing. Unhinged Woman. The one woman in here does one of those things I hate. Okay, so mild spoilers for this. The one woman in here, she threatens to go and expose her professor for misconduct, basically having a romantic relationship with her. That doesn't actually happen. She is just threatening him. And she's like, it's going to be a he said, she said, and who isn't going to believe me kind of thing. And she just thinks about, like, he won't really get in trouble. He'll just get a slap on the wrist kind of thing. And I hate that because women aren't believed in cases where they are reporting rape or sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, things like that. They are not believed because part of the problem is women and people who report just to hurt that person, but it hasn't actually happened. They are just making it up, just to be vindictive, revengeful, whatever the case may be, why ever they're doing it, to get attention themselves. They're just throwing this person under the bus, even though there was no misconduct whatsoever. And it really hurts women and people who are mistreated, who are harassed, who are raped, whatever the case may be, who have been taken advantage of by people in authority in their lives, whatever it is. And that's so frustrating. In this one girl is hugely manipulative and manipulates everybody. This story is a story about infidelity. So if you have trigger warnings for infidelity and miscarriage. That's the main point of this book, is this woman looking for an egg donor and doing like an anonymous egg donor cycle so that it would be her husband's sperm and another woman's egg, and then she would carry the baby. It's called Her Daughter's Mother because this main character, Lana Stone, has never considered herself a stalker until the night she impulsively follows a familiar face through the streets of New York. Her target, the anonymous egg donor she selected through an agency, the one who's making motherhood possible for her. Katya, a student at Columbia, is the yin to Lana's yang, a free spirit who lives life at the edge. Just as suddenly as Katya entered Lana's life, she disappears, and Lana might have been the last person to see her before she went missing. Determined to find out what became of the woman to whom she owes so much, Lana digs into Katya's past, even as the police grow suspicious of her motives. Fans of The Perfect Mother and The Wife Between Us becomes a gripping psychological suspense debut about two strangers, one incredible connection, and the steep price of obsession. Get both women's perspectives, Lana and Katya, and you get a couple of chapters. How did I put the dust jacket on backwards or upside down again? Clearly, I need to stop recording. You get a couple of chapters from the husband in this situation, but mostly between Lana and Katya. Her Mother's Daughter, it was a good story. I enjoyed it. I don't want to say predictable, but I have read this story kind of several times with the struggles with infertility and stuff like that, and it would touch a lot of people in a very personal way, for sure. That is not something I have struggled with. As you can hear, probably my children running around upstairs. Would I recommend this book, or who would I recommend this to? Well, it says I have not read The Perfect Mother or The Wife Between Us, although I think I have I have read The Wife Between Us, didn't I? Did I give that one to my mom to read? Yes, I have read The Wife Between Us. Yeah, if you like that book, I think you would like this one, and also The Push, for the stalking vibes of it. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up. It is an hour and 7 minutes into me talking about this, and I haven't even filmed the second video I wanted to do tonight. That's gonna have to be another night. It's chaos upstairs. This was my May wrap up. I had a lot of fun reading for the readathons and getting like all these books in. Like, that's amazing. Plus a couple of graphic novels and The Last Word. And this one wasn't all read this month, but I think I reached the 50% mark of this by May 1st, so I did read like half of this. I had like at least 20 hours left to listen to of this book. I think like 25 hours left. No, I was halfway, and it's 44 hours. So like 22 and a half hours left of this book. So that alone is like worth several books right there. And this was an audiobook, and this one was already like half done as well. But still, like, this is a lot of reading for me, and a couple graphic novels. Oh, and this one. Put that one on top, too. This is not a very pretty stack, is it? I got it all mixed up there. Can I get a thumbnail? So, reading all of this in a month was a lot for me. So, it was good. It was a good reading month. I enjoyed it. And thank you for watching. I will do, like, a quarterly wrap-up at the end of June, I guess, and talk more about the books I have read. And I will see you next time. Comment down below the best book you read in May. I really, really, really liked The Night Fire by Michael Connelly. I will talk to you next time. Bye.